welcome back to the channel. Today a bit different. Today we're doing a review of the Hackmotion sensor. Is it just another piece of tech to chuck in your cupboard after a couple of weeks of practice, or is this a game changer? Well, for all of you impatient golfers out there, it's great. It does what it says on the packet, and it does it very well. The Hackmotion is a sensor which goes on your wrist and on the back of your lead hand, which tells you the angles that the wrist has during your golf swing in real time if you want them. It will show you the exact angles that your has in 3 dimensions. That means basically up and down, bowed and cupped, up and down. I don't know what you would call that really, droop and lift. And it also gives you rotation. There's lots of nice technical names for this. We're talking about flexion and extension, ulnar and radial deviation, and rotation. Fortunately, that's the same. But I'll be talking more about kind of bowing and cupping your wrists and drooping or lifting your wrists and hinging, I suppose, is the things that we've been talking about in the past. One of the things that I want to do today, though, is really kind of stick to, what's the product? Is it worth the money? What do you get out of the box? And is it something that maybe you should think about investing in? It starts off, it's very, very simple to set up. You've got basically a sensor on your wrist, which goes on just like a watch, and then another sensor on your hand, which you can either use with this elasticated band, or there's also a clip that you can clip it onto your glove. And basically it's secured onto the back of your hand. There's also then a very simple setup where at best you place your hand on a flat table and calibrate the instrument. First of all, with your hand in this position, then you tilt your wrist back as far as it will go, calibrate once more, and that's it. So you're really up and going within a couple of minutes. Once you actually set up the screen, you can go into either a practice routine or an analysis routine. When you are analysing your swing, it will give you more of a kind of an idea of what the wrist is doing without telling you whether it's doing it right or doing it wrong. When you go into the practice routine, it will compare you to benchmarks and tell you how consistently you are actually doing this. In fact, if you want to, it will actually play a little tune to you while you're doing it, as long as your wrist remains within certain parameters. So as soon as you get too much wrist angle in one direction or the other, the sound will stop, and therefore you can theoretically hit golf balls and listen whether you're doing it correctly or whether you're not. One of the things I must warn you about, though, this is quite complicated to understand, in as much that it's giving you numbers that you haven't seen before. It's giving me numbers that I haven't seen before in this detail. About 25 years ago, I did quite a lot of work with 3-dimensional analysis where the wrist was also in there, but we spent far much, if not too much time, thinking about what hips were doing and what shoulders were doing, really to get too invested in the wrists. And since then, for some reason or other, it's kind of disappeared into the ether. But it's back with a bang now. And one of the things I'm going to try and do over the next couple of weeks, if not months, is try and give you a better idea of what's good, what's bad, how do you change it if you want to change it, and why would you anyway? But just out of the box, it's all about getting some kind of feedback. What do you do when you're not thinking about it? What is your wrist doing, and is that good or is that bad relative to the benchmarks that they actually have in the software? So obviously there's been a lot of trainers out there and golf professionals using this device without shouting about it too much, obviously, and they've now got data in the system so that they can say, okay, there is kind of a benchmark here where you could say you shouldn't be bending your wrist in one direction or the other too much or too little in some cases. Once you actually set up, the simplest thing is basically get the golf club in your hand and hit a couple of shots. The software will ping for you to tell you that it's actually got the results, and you can either go straight into it and have a look at what actually happened in that swing if you're working on changes in what your wrist is doing. But I would say to start off with, don't bother. Get yourself a dozen balls or so and just hit a dozen balls. Try not to think about what you're doing whatsoever, and then go into the software otherwise after you've ended the session, because you can then analyze totally what you're doing and even compare it to what golf professionals are doing or what the benchmarks would say you should be doing. To give you a kind of an idea about what we're kind of looking for, obviously a great deal is going to be dependent on the way you grip the club. And one of the things I love about this device is it's destroying illusions that we have about the golf swing. One of them being the position at the top of the swing. I always believed, I think as many, that as long as kind of the lead wrist is pretty straight at the top of the golf swing, then I probably don't have any cupping or bowing of the wrist at the top of the swing. But this isn't quite true because of the way that the actual hand is built. When you're holding a golf club, in fact, in a neutral grip, you're probably going to have anything up to 20-25 degrees of cupping in the wrist in the address position. And therefore, the position you have at the top of the swing will be relative to that. A very strong grip will obviously mean at the top of the swing you're probably going to have more extension than somebody who has a very weak grip where there isn't as much extension at the starting position. Why is this important? Well, quite simply because extension especially controls club face. If I go into a lot of extension, it's probably easier from this side. If I go into extension, you can see that it's opening the club face. And if I go into flexion or bow the wrist back, I'm going to close the club face. The more that this actually is happening in the golf swing, obviously the more difficult it will be to get the club back onto the ball. As a kind of a benchmark, you could say that you're probably going to have anything up to 10 degrees difference between the cupping or bowing of the hand at the address position and at the top of the swing, and up to 30 degrees difference between the position at the top of the swing and impact. And whether you be starting with a cupped hand or a bowed hand doesn't necessarily matter. It's the relationships and how much change there is in the angles of your wrist during the swing which is more important, and that these changes are consistent. Obviously, a repetitive movement will produce a repetitive wrist action, which will produce a repetitively square club face at impact. As I said before, I'll get back to you in the coming weeks and months about how to actually do this. But for today, I really wanted to think more about and tell you a little bit more about kind of what you're getting out of the box. Like I say, sensors very easy to attach and use, very easy to calibrate. You can use it for full swings with all clubs, and you can use it for putting. Yes, there is wrist movement in putting, and yes, there should be wrist movement in putting, and yes, the less deviation between one putting stroke and the next, the more chance you have of holding the golf ball, because the more control you have over club face. When you look at the packet, you're going to be able to either get a Pro or a standard package. The Pro package gives you readouts and analysis in all of these three different changes in wrist angle, whereas the amateur package just gives you a change in the extension and flexion of the wrist, which is the main one that you will probably need to know if you're just basically thinking about, am I going to be hitting it right or left open or closed club face. You're talking around about $500 for the standard package and about $1,000 for the full package. Again, there'll be fluctuations. There's a Black Friday coming soon where there'll be discounts, and I shall leave a code below where you can also have a discount just by putting JTGolf after you get in on the coupon, and you'll get a small discount on the device with that as well. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a question, is it worth the money? Is it something that you need? I need this. This is probably the best thing I've seen on the market since Trapman. Launch monitors really changed the way I teach, but not necessarily because I was telling my students about all the numbers which were coming out of the launch monitor. It's a similar kind of thing with this. I could imagine myself letting students use this and not talking about their risk deviation or changes at all. And at the same time, using the information to be able to explain to them better how the changes in their wrist angles is having a major effect on where the golf ball's going, and most certainly it is. I think what you're able to do here is quite incredible. I am still not absolutely sure that it's something that if you strap it on your wrist, you're in any way going to be able to change your swing well, I mean, without killing your swing, without help. So I would most certainly look for an instructor in your area who understands a little bit about and has heard of Hackmotion and is able to understand and work with the numbers that Hackmotion is giving you. This, however, I can really see as maybe a little bit of kind of the last piece in the jigsaw, and a little bit of information that we haven't had that we need most certainly as instructors, and I'm absolutely blown away by it. And that's why I'm going to be back very shortly with an awful lot of videos, not necessarily about Hackmotion, but about what Hackmotion is telling us and how you can work with Hackmotion. So if you want, you can get yourself a Hackmotion and make sure that you subscribe to the channel and just watch all the videos I bring in the next couple of weeks and months, because there's going to be a lot of them, because this device is sensational. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to me, do that, otherwise you're not going to know how to use it. And if you'd like to become a patron, I shall leave a link below. Thank you to all of the patrons to the channel for helping me to get back and see you so often. If you like this kind of idea of reviewing material, especially tech, leave a comment below as well, because this is something which really, obviously, you can see, I enjoy doing as well. We'll be back very shortly with the next one. Until then, bye-bye.